Once again, welcome to all the participants. I thank you on behalf of UISG, of the presence of MMI, who is the one who organized this workshop in collaboration with the USG, which is the Union of Superior Generals of the Men. And we also thank Mr. Bruno Apostoli for being here. I now give the floor to Veseverbe, and I wish you the best for this workshop today. Thank you. Good morning. His mic is not working. We can't hear him. Apologies, but we can't properly hear the speaker.
tous ceux qui sont présents dans cette salle et puis aussi online. Je ne sais pas si tout le monde est
So welcome to everyone, those connected online, those who are here in presence. I know that we have more than 100 persons here connected today with us from the different continents, and many are here with us. I quickly introduce myself. I am
une congrégation
Brother
française.
Hervé. I belong to a French congregation. I'm the president. I am the ex-president
J'essaye de
of this association, MMI. So I will try
qui parlera peut-être
to begin
à un moment donné
our worship.
du présent et du futur de MMI.
I am here to speak to you about the present and the future of MMI. As it has just been said by Sister Therese, that the future of MMI
Étroite avec l'UISG
is entwined with the history of USG and UISG. And I suppose that all the formation programs that will be published in the different websites available and pages available are going to be a sign of this collaboration among these three different units. Now, this is the result of the will of sharing all of our knowledge. And here we are carrying out this first session, which is the beginning of a cycle that will be taking place. So I would like now to introduce the first speaker of this morning, and I will do so in Italian. After that, we'll be moving on to a prayer to introduce us to the day, Bruno Apostoli. So Mr. Bruno Apostoli has a very nice last name. Apostoli in English means disciple. So he has many, many years of experience. He has been collaborating with one of the highest authorities when it comes to the Italian scenario of communication. And he has worked when it comes to communication with universities, government, and ecclesial authorities. He showed me his CV, and he has a very long list of all the collaboration he's had and that he has ongoing. After having founded two graphic design agencies in Rome, now he works as a freelance, placing his creativity and knowledge at the service of editorial, institutional, and cultural projects that come his way. His style combines elegance, clarity, visual clarity, and great attention. He pays great attention to detail. So I hope that we will be able to make the most of his experience. I go back to French in order to begin this second moment, this fraternal moment. We will do so with a prayer. And we, as you know, are beginning a new liturgical year with the beginning of Advent. And that means that this is a new beginning for all of us. And it's an invitation also for us, those working in communications, to to be
sont endormis
individuals who are capable of reawaken those who are sleeping, those who are also sleepless and also then are very tired all the time. So through our prayer,
sorte de prière universelle
I have chosen some sort of universal prayer, which I have placed on the screen in 4 different languages so that everyone can follow.
d'espoir. En ce début de l'Avent, nous
O God
attendons
of peace,
impatiemment ta
in our
venue
world divided by so many conflicts, you called us
dans lequel les
in
âmes
this time of Advent.
sont transformées
We await with
par la
impatience your
lumière.
presence in our midst.
Nous pensons au pape Léon,
We are hoping for peace and hope
un monde
where
où les conflits
weapons are transformed in
effacent
weapons of peace. Let's think of Lebanon. We are dreaming times in which conflicts among nations and between nations are just something that belongs to the past.
devenir
Please, O Lord, journey with us
prince de la paix.
and give us a hope that is boundless. And we ask it in the name of Jesus Christ, the Prince of Peace. Amen.
In our world divided by so many conflicts, we are called to welcome our relatives and strangers. We are invited to overcome our linguistic, cultural, and political differences. We must face the challenge of living in harmony with each other. This morning, O God, inspire in us the desire to build a better world where all will be able to live safely. We ask in it in the name of Jesus Christ, the Prince of Peace. Amen.
Amen.
Oh Dios de alegría, queremos celebrar todas las
Oh
cosas
Lord of happiness, we want to, of joy, we want to thank you for all that we have received and we want to share with you the gift. And thank you for the gift of sharing with so many around us. The only thing that we can do is to be joyful for the great creation that you have shared with us. Enlighten us, O Lord, and help us to be visible for all those who search your presence and want to have you in their midst in this time of year, especially. And we ask you this in the name of Jesus Christ, the Prince of Peace. Amen.
Oh Dio d'amore,
God of love, you invite us, especially in the heart of our service, communication service, to be
della buona notizia,
sentinels of the good news, to be those who reawaken others to hear the good news, and also to be those who face so much vulnerability and poverty of every kind. You invite us to show compassion to all human beings, especially those who our world considers or deems undesirable. Inspire our actions, inspire our words, O God, so that all may feel your infinite, endless love. Inspire our actions and our words, O God, so that all may feel our endless love and your endless love through us. We ask you this in the name of Jesus Christ, the Prince of Peace. Amen. In the name of the Father, of the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Je crois que nous sommes dans les temps.
So, just a few words
Le plan de cette matinée,
just to share with you a little bit the agenda of the morning. First of all, we'll be listening
Bruno,
to our key speaker, Bruno.
10h30.
And then from 9:15, that is until 10:30 Rome time. After that, we're gonna have a small break.
Rond pour une dernière heure.
a half an hour break. And then at the top of the hour, we'll start again for a second session that is from 11 to 12 Rome time once again. And I believe that if we were to have any questions, we can prepare them maybe and then send them or write them on the chat so that Therese can monitor the chat and collect them. Here in the hall, you also can ask your questions directly. So maybe before the end of the first session, we might have a Q&A session where we can listen to your questions. Thank you. You have the floor. So here I am. Good morning. Good morning to you all. And thank you. Thank you for being here today. My name is Bruno Apostoli. I'm 57 and I've been working for more than 30 years as it has been said, I am an expert in communications and graphic design 7 days of the week 24/7 I would say, and that's why I would say that that has given me a lot of experience. I have had the opportunity to work with many religious congregations and institutions, and I still do so. I also still work with some of them, some congregations, some organizations for who I carry out different kinds of communications works based on the need. Now, today we will be doing this journey, a quick one, I would say, in the world of graphic design, because 3 hours used to, tackle topics that have to do with 30 years experience is not easy. So it's quite a summary what I'll be sharing. But based on the indications I've been given, I would like to focus on the basic guidelines that has to do with composition, graphic composition, and the three main topics would be graphic composition, font, and color, which are the main ingredients, I would say, in order to be able to create any kind of graphic project. Together, we'll be looking at some slides that I have prepared just to, that will help us and that have as is an attempt to make it, to make my presentation less dull and also to give some color to my words and images as well. So I would like to begin with a little introduction, which is an attempt to explain a little bit what a graphic designer does and what is the objective of graphic design when it's about, especially, well, here connected directly with my line of work, of course, and what is the main goal. Let me see if I can open my document. You should be able to see it now. Okay. So I will use the words. I will quote a colleague of mine, Massimo Vignelli, who was an Italian, very famous Italian graphic designer in all the world, who passed 10 years ago, but that actually left a mark, especially a visual mark when it comes to what he did, but also because of clarifying certain key concepts that I actually will be using in order to add some value to my explanation and presentation. So the core of design, as Vignelli said, is that the life of the designer is a life of battles, mainly the fight against ugliness. Now, ugliness for us, or what we mean with it when it comes to graphics, it's something that has not been planned or projected according to the correct criteria, because what beauty is subjective. I like it, I don't like it, but ugliness is determined by some criteria. That is, when a project appears with flaws or mistakes that have to do with mistakes connected with graphic planning. So this is the main fight that daily I have to fight. This is the battle I need to fight every day. That is to avoid mistakes, avoid the most basic and common mistakes, which often happen and just ruin a project. Pignelli also said, I see graphic design as the semantically correct, syntactically coherent, and pragmatically understandable organization of information. I like that it's visually powerful, intellectually elegant, and above all, timeless. Now, these three concepts of semantic, syntactic, and pragmatic will be defined quickly by me now, because this is something that we want to tackle quickly because it's a bit more boring and that might affect the flow of our presentation, which is moving on afterwards to more practical concepts. But then we need to clarify these three concepts. Semantics is the study of relationship of science with the objects to which they are applied. That is, the science, the elements that we use within our composition are the ones that actually give the meaning of the object that we are trying to speak about. And syntactics is the study of the formal relation of one sign with another. So just as is comparable to linguistic syntactics, is the study that is between verb, subject, etc., direct object, indirect object. Now, the right syntactics when it comes to communication is the correct use of those elements that make up the project. And pragmatics is the study of the science, the relationship of science with the participants. That is, when you prepare a project needs to communicate something. It has to give a message. If it's not happening, then it means that you've done it wrong. Now, if we could go in depth a little bit more on the three topics or concepts, semantics takes care of meaning, syntactics is about the components that are part of the nature of the project, and pragmatics is making us understand if the project is understood or not, and if the project doesn't convey the message we had in mind, then it's wrong. So the idea is to create a communication that is, as Vignelli said, timeless. They can last over time. So if we consider a company, any company, when we have and when we give a visual identity to a company, it means that we're trying to give them something that will identify them over time, forever, and that will be able. So the most famous brands, if you think about it, have this aim, this scope, that is to keep alive an identity over time that is constant and that never dies. And here we apply another key element, a key message of design, which is less is more, which is Ludwig Mies van der Rohe. Less is more. Less equals more if you use graphic elements to express that same concept, which means that when we have a project, a graphic project, the risk is of overloading information, giving too much information. To add is easy, actually very easy. I add a line, I add a row, I add something. You know, it could be endless. Adding is something always that you can do. Now the effort is about taking away, making it less. That is to take away what creates confusion, that is just superfluous, that is more than you need. Another very well-known colleague, Bruno Munari, said that complicating things is easy, simplifying is difficult. To complicate things, you just add everything you want: colors, shapes, actions, decorations, characters, environments. Everyone everyone is capable of complicating. Few are able to simplify things. To simplify, we need to remove, and to remove, you need to know what to remove. Simplification is a sign. It's a sign of intelligence. Bruno Munari was a great Italian graphic designer who during who in this very short quote has explained very clearly the concept of less is more. That is, we always need to, I mean, our attempt always needs to be uh, to try to reach the core of our communication, leaving aside anything that would just distract us from understanding the message. If something is distracting, then we should remove it. What I do during the final part of a project when we're about to finalize it is that we try, should I go slower? Yes, that would be a great thing. Thank you. Apologies, says the speaker. I always try to, you know, just press through it because I know time is always flying, but I understand there's translation, so I should go slower. Especially because this part is a bit, it's very complex also when it comes to a linguistic perspective. But then after this, don't worry, everything will be much simpler after this part. Yes, but we have translation and we need to be able to follow. So thank you for going. I apologize, the speaker says once again. I'll try to make, to pay attention to the pace. But then once I've finished this first part, it will be easier because it's more about images, and also we'll have more time also to speak about the concepts in a different way. But yes, I'll be speaking slowly. The interpreters appreciate that. Thank you. So once we have clarified these concepts, which are conceptual elements, key elements on which good communication is grounded, then we can move on and we can start speaking about the three topics that I told you about, that is composition, font, and colors. Then after that, we'll have a final section which will be focusing mostly on your works, that is your graphic works or other works that have been done, and the comparison. So, for example, to the request in comparison to the request. So, for example, what happens is that you're asked to redo a work as a project that has already been done. So, there's a project that requires your graphic design. They ask you, can you improve this? Can it be better? It can be done better or differently? Now, I understand that this project is not working for me anymore. Can you help me with that? So then you get a project that has already been elaborated, and then you work on it, and then you'll have a before and an after, and you'll have the opportunity to compare and contrast. So just very concretely, just in order not to give a concrete example. So let's begin with composition, as I had said already. So composition. So we're speaking here of basic elements. This is what we use within a project to keep together the different elements. So basically, in our life, it happens often that we do this, that we make compositions. This is a time in which we all start, for example, creating our nativity, because of Christmas time coming. So what do? Well, we place the different characters in different ways. Maybe last year we had, Mary and Jesus and the shepherds placed here or there. Now this year we're gonna be placing them in a different spot. Maybe we place the extra characters in different places. And when we do that, when we organize, we have a specific space. It's a limited space, such as it could be for us graphic designers. We might have to do a leaflet or a program, and then we have to consider that there is a criteria. As it, we believe that the initial push comes from spontaneity, but actually it's not like that. We have to project things because even though we think that we're being spontaneous, actually we are following a criteria. We follow some kind of So, for example, we look at this and we say, okay, here something is missing. Oh, we need a tree here, or we need a bush because it seems that something is missing because there's a little bit of space. So, there are too many scene characters on this side. We need more on this side. So, we are actually making a composition. And this is the same thing that we do. We're not aware of that, but we're doing it. And when we're doing a logo or we are choosing a color for or the font for a heading, it's the same thing. But when you do it for a project, a graphic design project, then you do this while being aware of it. You're not just following some kind of sensitivity or feeling or inner desire. You might consider, you know, there are some activities that look nicer and look more organized. Others look more balanced in the distribution of the characters. Others not. Same thing for the tree, for the Christmas tree. Sometimes when you distribute, the decorations on the tree, sometimes you fill the bottom more than the top or not. Maybe we are used to do things and to have seen things in a certain way, so we just carry on doing those things in the same way, or maybe we add a little bit, our parents did it like that and we do it the same, or we add a little bit of a different style, or maybe someone comes and then they are helping and they would just do it differently. Maybe they would place all the stars underneath and the bigger decorations on top. Why? Because maybe that person has not seen too many Christmas trees, so wouldn't know how to distribute the decorations. So what does that mean? That we need to have seen a lot. We have to have the experience. We need to look. If we have seen many documents, many logos, many things, design projects, more we have the experience and more we are aware of what we would like to do in front of a white paper. If not, we will just find ourselves not knowing what to do. So now let's move on to some key concepts connected with graphic design, which are five. First of all, number one. So, number one is the importance of the basis of everything is typography, and we need to keep that in mind. We'll have to say more about this, but then you see, this is also the key element of communication. Using the right character of font and the combination of two different ones can be the key to success or not of a project. The second key element are grids. That is the structure within a page that allows us to contain the different elements. So grids are not to be seen as something that limits you. They're not cages. But they're just starting points seen or understood as the structure, as the skeleton of a composition. So a correct grid, a well done grid, would allow us also to define how to position certain elements in one way and not another, because having a grid allows us to align, for example, two different elements instead of having them just casually placed within an open space. Doing things by chance is not something that should happen when we are carrying out a graphic design or plan. That leads to chaos. Nothing needs to be left to improvising or chance or a lack of a plan, a project. Another key element is white space. White space within a project, white space seen as an empty space. That could also be in colors, but it's an empty space. Could be a place where nothing happens, or it can be something very important. It's like when you pause in between the different notes in music, you also need to make pauses also within a project, and you have the empty spaces and the fill spaces, and this contrast allows for the composition to be harmonious and to be well done. So white space is not a lack of information or an error. It's mainly often a key element on which the project is based because it allows for what is there to be highlighted, to be given more importance. Another important key element are the size of the things that we're going to be using. So this creates visual hierarchies. So smaller, less important, smaller, even less important. So important, you see, written in big letters, less importance seen in smaller letters, even less importance written in even smaller letters. So if you read a manifest, for example, it's really important to have different reading levels. That is, that there is something that is just seen up front because of its size, which is the main message that we need to be able to identify. That is, and then following, you have different sizes, different positions, different fonts that don't have the same importance that you were given to the main element. So this alternating of the different elements gives more relevance or less relevance to what we have, and this is what creates the visual hierarchies. So in the order that you decide to follow is required so that the eye of the viewer goes where you want it to go and to focus on a specific item or element. Because if that's what you want them to see, then the trick is to have a bigger heading and a subtitle that is a bit smaller. This is something that might just feel that is something that you would give for granted, but it's not. It's not trivial. And then colors. The colors also speak about meaning and emotions. So what we do is that often, while being aware of it or not, we connect to every color and emotion. We match emotions to colors. If you were my client, I would ask you, what is the you think when, or how do you feel when you think about the red color? Some would speak about love, some would speak about violence, some would say that it makes them think about violence or uh, energy. So each color could have different beings for different people. For some might be love, for some might be violence. It's opposite meanings, but that are identified with the same color. So it might happen that you're doing the cover of a book, for example, and you're speaking about the love story of two persons, and the heading is in red because of the emotions that red will convey, because it speaks about love. But then maybe we're doing a leaflet against war. And we also will be writing the heading in red because red speaks about violence, blood, bloodshed. So, as you see, colors truly speak about different meanings and emotions, which will change depending also on the context. So, what we need to do is to be able to know this, to be aware of this, and know how to use them. And not just to choose a color just because. Okay, oh, I'm gonna use for this leaflet against the war, I'm gonna place the heading in yellow. Yes, okay, might work, but let's do things easily. Let's also use common, or common cliches sometimes is also helpful because then people will understand them instead of making choices that might require an explanation. It's not that you do a manifest and then you have to explain why it's written like that so that people understand it. It has to be understood immediately. The project needs to immediately convey the message we had in mind without any explanations. It's like with paintings. Oh, here the artist wanted to represent this and this other thing, and that's the meaning behind it. And then there's an explanation next to the painting. Design doesn't need that, shouldn't need that. It has to be immediate, the message that it conveys. So, summarizing what has been said, so design is needs to be useful and beautiful both, so we are not interested of doing something that is beautiful but only an end to itself. It has to be beautiful but also useful, because the function of what we are trying to communicate needs to have so the objective has to be very clear. So design is beautiful if it's useful if it's beautiful. It must be both useful and beautiful. And now we move on to the lighter part of my presentation, I hope. And we begin with very key basic concepts, which are, however, paramount. So let's imagine this is an empty space, right? An empty space with a line, a horizon line. Now, if in this space we add a bottle, for example, a bottle or any other object, an apple, helicopter, whatever you like, it would work anyway. We have created here a composition, a static composition, a composition that is considered static because we have an element. There are no specific tensions happening, so this is a static composition. Now, if we want it to be dynamic, then a dynamic composition is what creates an imbalance. That is, to have an object in an opposite position, not in the middle, creates some kind of emptiness. So there is dynamism because there's an empty space and then there's a full space, and this creates a contrast. That's something that you didn't have before. From the middle, you move to the side. And here we've already created movement. Movement can be rebalanced. So you could have a static composition where you add more elements. So for example, by adding a second bottle, or another object of the same kind, then you have created a new balance between empty space and full space. If you overlap them, for example, you have a static composition like the first one where you only had one bottle, but then you also are adding movement because you are adding depth. So these studies on balance and composition were made by many artists such as Morandi, Cézanne, and other painters who did compositions such as this one, seeking for balance and the perfect composition of the objects you can see here. And then it was done the same painting while moving one of the objects. Now, 95% of these compositions of these artists are compositions where he was seeking for harmony and perfect balance. Cézanne, we're speaking always of Cézanne here. I don't know how many, there are thousands of examples where he does that, where the attempt is always of creating a balanced composition, having three pairs. Elements where they were all close together, and then elements that were just spaced out, creating a diagonal line and creating tensions just by moving around the objects in a way that seems just happening by chance, but it's not. Now, this is also seen when we look at an advertisement. If you look at an ad of perfume or cream, face cream or others, or even food like hamburgers, like McDonald's, the composition is always something that has been reasoned on this based on this concept, that is to balance, to create a certain order and to create a visual balance. And here we go back to absolute abstraction. So for example, here we have a black circle within a white space. So static, absence of movement. The only thing here is that as I said to Sister Teresa some time ago, that we always need to remember that we have been accustomed, especially in the Western world, to have some kind of approach to visual stuff. So us, and I'm speaking about the Western world because for the Eastern world, it's exactly the opposite. I would say we look at things from the left to the right, from left to right, from left to right, and from the top towards the bottom. That's how we move, and this affects us and conditions us when we look at things. So this being said, when we, for example, look at an element in the middle, and this is for both worlds, Western and Eastern, this is something that sees us in agreement. However, we must remember that elements have a certain weight within a composition. Every element has a specific it represents something specific. So within this composition, and here we this is connected with our perception. If we have an element that is exactly in the middle, might always seem to us a bit moving or move towards the bottom somehow. Now I'll show you how it works. This is an element that is also the middle, but also a little bit moved towards the top. If you see them, if you compare them, you see they both seem to be in the middle, seen on their own. But then next to one another, you see one is tending to the top and one is tending to the bottom. So there is some kind of movement. So the line of the bottom line of the paper is somehow creating an attraction to one towards the bottom, another one's towards the top. So when we are creating a project and we have to place a logo in the middle of the page, well, then we need to place it a little bit higher up, a bit on top of the middle, because if not, somebody would say it's not centered. Then you measure and it's centered, exactly at the center, but this is an optical correction that you need to do because all of the elements that we place within a space have a weight. If you place them higher up, they are more heavy, and if they're placed lower down at the bottom, they are less heavy. So there's always this attraction towards the bottom or the top, and we need to keep that in mind. I move on. Here we have another element. This element here is in the higher part of the page, which gives us an idea of lightness. Is weightless. It looks like it's outside of a composition. It looks like something that has this tendency to move upwards. Now here we perceive this as something heavier. You see, in comparison, this is light, this is heavy. Now this is heavy, and this is quite light. Now, if we were to think that this is a balloon that is flying away, if you place it up there, is the best way to give us this idea of lightness. This is a balloon that is flying away, almost leaving the paper. So it's very light, it's dynamic because it's not in the middle, it's a bit towards the side, like the second bottle that we had seen before, moved from the middle, in the middle, static on the side, dynamic, and it's in the case of the balloon, it's an object that is truly trying to, escape the paper somehow. Now, exactly because we are used, Western people, to read things from left to right, we see this as a balloon that is actually leaving the paper, is, getting out of the paper, leaving it. Now, if it was here, it would have been perceived as a balloon that is entering our paper because of this connection of looking at things from east to west, from left to right. Sorry, in the Western world, in the Eastern world, it would be the opposite. I don't know if there's anyone from Japan, for example, might confirm this. So this is perceived as a balloon that is entering in our composition, us from the Western world. And just like in a theater, this is how we see it. People enter from the left and leave the stage on the right. If we had a person who is running, so this is a manifest, it's a marathon, that you're doing a leaflet for, and you have this man running and you place him in the middle, just like with the first bottle. Now, even if he's running, it is anyway giving you some kind of static concept. It's this is not really conveying the message you want to give because even though it's running, it doesn't show that. Now, instead, if you place it like this and not in the middle anymore, it's being perceived as a person who is running, who is entering within this composition, that is entering the composition. Or if you place it here, you would perceive it as the person who is almost arriving, that is at the finish line, that is leaving the paper. Instead, the other one would be perceived as someone that is entering the paper, the composition. So these are just very basic, simplified, overly simplified examples that I'm trying to use to make us understand that when we position something within a composition, should never be done just by chance. Oh, I placed it there because it seemed like a good idea. No, there must be an awareness. You must be aware that if you place it there, you'll have a certain effect. And if you place it somewhere else, the response will be different. So the message will be different based on the position. And if you don't foresee that, they might misunderstand your message. And this is something we shouldn't allow. This shouldn't happen because if not, it would mean that we haven't listened to what we've been saying here. So, here, person running, the runner. So you can see it. It's moving in, it's moving out. Now, this one is returning for us because coming from the right is someone who came back because he forgot something. So, so when the elements move us or go into one direction or the other, we need to keep that in mind. So, for example, this is very simplified here because we have a runner, but then it could be also with other elements. It's very clear that this is not what you wanted to say because you placed it in the wrong direction or in the wrong spot. So, if we place an image just wherever and then we write towards the finish line, well, it's not really correct because it doesn't give you an idea that this person is going to the finish line. This seems like he's beginning the race. Everyone moving towards a goal. Well, it's best that he moves the other way if that's what we're trying to do to make everyone run in the same direction. Because if not, it seems like we are going towards what we have already done. But if we are trying to say that we're moving forward, if instead we are trying to say let's go back, let's return, we are trying to give a message like let's go back to our origins, then this here would have a sense of using it like that, because it's giving us the idea that he's returning, going back. Now, here, what we see here is the strength of, well, to refer to it as colors, I'm not sure, it's not really correct because black and white are achromatic. They're not considered like colors, but black and white within a gray space, even though they have the same size, the white one looks bigger if you look at it, right? Why? Because it's bright. So the perception, we're always speaking about perception here, remember? Is that the size is exactly the same, but the white one looks bigger. So it's an optical. In order to rebalance this optical effect, then you need to reduce, for example, the brighter element, that is the white circle, to create a balanced visual element. And when it comes to composition, this is an abstract example. But then when you have an image, for example, where you have two elements, you have to keep in mind that the brighter one will seem bigger than the one that is darker. And if we want to balance them, we will have to make the lighter, the brighter, element smaller. Now here, this is another simplification connected with what we were speaking, what we were saying about chaos and visual mood, that could happen when you are carrying out the project. Let's imagine that we are doing the first page of a book. So now we are here. This is like you have different colors. So if you have this, so for this book cover, you have all these spheres, all these circles, and you have so many colors, and you have big ones up, small down, and then you have different sizes all over the place. So this is a mistake you shouldn't do. You shouldn't just allow for the eye of the viewer to just go around without an aim. You need to identify where you want the eye to go, to focus on. So here, for example, yes, here they see the black, it's all black and gray, and then you only have a red dot, and then this somehow has allowed for a hierarchy to appear and identifies the place. So we need to take away what is not needed or make it less present. So when you take away all of the black and white dots, then you see you've cleared out the chaos. You see the heading, the subheading or subtitle. You see some color that creates contrast with the title, and this allows for the eye to really hit the spot. And we've done a good job in comparison to what could have been this other result. So remove, remove, remove. And what I said about visual hierarchies is important. To look at something like this makes you consider that if you had something like this, you would read first the big heading. That's where your eye goes first. Then you would move to this nice sentence here. Then you would read this other part, or maybe you might be looking on this side here, and then you might go up to read the other part, the quote, because maybe it's smaller, even though it's next to the heading, so you might not read it immediately. So these levels or visual hierarchies are used to send the reader to go where we want it, for the eye of the reader to go where we want it to go. Heading, subtitle, then maybe it will go a little bit to the right, a little bit to the left. And it is truly important for us to be able to manage the balance among all these elements. There are studies that have been done on the perception of space. And this has been agreed that when we imagine that there is a surface such as this one, any kind of surface, it could be a book, a cover, a manifest, a leaflet, the focal points of attention are four, and it's these 4 points. So when we look at something, these are the percentages of how we work. Our attention is always about the first sight, and always from the Western perspective, from the top to the bottom, to the left to the right. So the main important space within this paper would be where you have the first dot, the 41%. Then it would go down to 25, then up again to the right, and then down again. Why? Well, this because it depends on how we have actually managed the hierarchy of the elements. If we have distributed proportionately the different elements and also given the different sizes like this. If I have a very big title, big heading at the bottom, obviously the eye of the viewer will go down there. But then in general perception, when it's in comparison to a surface, this is how it works. Our eye tends always to go to the upper corner and then to go down to the bottom of that same side, and then which is the left side. And then we always need to understand that the focal point of a space is the one on the left top corner. Same thing goes if the paper or the space is vertical or horizontal. Now we can skip this, I would say. And this, we can look at it maybe later. These are all things that we have said already. Somehow we can skip this and we can just leave, the chit chat aside. And then this is all when it comes to composition. So I've given you an idea about what it means to speak about composition. We could carry on endlessly speaking about this. However, the important thing is for you to perceive, to understand the importance of this balance that needs to be respected within a composition. Within a composition, things have to be placed by choice, not just because it felt good or it seemed to me it was okay.
Resta ancora mezz'ora
We still have half an hour
ci sono
in connection with the first section, so I don't know if there are any questions before we move on, or if there's anything that was not clear or I didn't explain properly or that you would like to know more about. So if you have any questions, this is the time to do so, to ask them.
una
You?
domanda
I do have one. I don't know if it's because I misunderstood or not. I apologize. The speaker says if it was my fault. Concretely, if, for example, we needed to do any kind of presentation, any kind.
dobbiamo cercare
Now, do we need to
desequilibrio o
look for the unbalance or the balance?
perché abbiamo detto che
Because we
un
said
design dinamico
that a dynamic design
creare
needs to generate some kind of unbalance. Well, the unbalance can be an element that could cause success, but is more difficult to achieve because you need to know how to use it. It's like a horse, you know. Uh, so it's like having a wild horse. I mean, you need to know how to manage it. So if you want to use the bottle in a different way or in a wild way, then you could do it. I would start by doing things in a balanced way, uh, because that would allow for the result to be truly what we are aiming at or for. Now, it also depends a lot on your skills and your capacity of working on a project is something that has to do with the individual. It has to do with the studies you've done, the skills you have, your creativity, etc. To make a comparison, we compare this to cooking. So, for example, when you start cooking, what do? And you're not a great cook. You don't know how to do it. You get recipes and then you follow exactly the recipe. And so 5 grams, and you measure 5 grams and place it in exactly when the recipe states. This is because we have to study the recipe. We need to learn it. We need to make it our own, and we just follow, directly, clearly the guidelines. We don't say, "Oh, add 150." If the recipe says 5, well, then we just place 5. Then the second time we could experience a little bit more, and we say, okay, let's add a few grams more, or maybe instead of placing chili, I will add something else. So the same approach goes for graphic design. Before you can do this, you need to know the elements. So when I cook, when I start with a basic recipe, that's what I do. I take a very simple recipe and I start with that. And then if it comes out and it's eatable, then I carry on. If it's not, then I need to study more. Same thing goes for graphic design. This is a process that you have to go by stages. You need to begin with the basics and then move forward. And to study is paramount. So what I'm giving you here are just, basic elements on certain topics. Elements are just the tip of the iceberg that need to be studied in depth. You can actually look for more information that can somehow broaden the topic and that can help you understand it more. But then studying is really important when it comes to graphic design. I mean, you need to prepare yourself. You need to study. Improvisation is not the thing here. The project always needs to be the result of long, hard study and the knowledge of the ingredients you're using. I don't know if I've answered your question. The thing is, the answer is the best thing is to simplify. Less is more. Yes, Therese? Often, at least what happens to me is that I get graphic design programs, Canvas that have been done by mothers or the referent of the community that then I have to rearrange. And I lose so many hours to rearrange something that has been done. On one hand, I would like to respect the project that just got to me and that I have to improve. On the other side, sometimes it would just be best to just erase everything and start from scratch. So my question is maybe a bit philosophical and not practical, but then in this case, what's best? To try to rearrange things and to improve it, or call them and tell them, okay, let's start from scratch because this is not working. Because it's not about wasting time, but it also is. So what is best in your opinion? So, is there a way, are there like skills that can help us improve and enhance the ready-made project, or is much more difficult and then it's easier to just start from scratch? Well, I would be more in favor of starting from scratch to adjust, to improve. Going back to the example of food, if you get an already made meal, how do you improve it? If it's lacking some salt, yes, you can add some salt, but it's not that you can take away the tomato sauce. If it's already, full of tomato sauce, you can change that, right? So that's the same thing. So it's best sometimes to recook the whole dish again. So same thing goes here. Luckily, or maybe not, Canva and other apps allow you to help you, but then also, allow you to find ready-made things, such as ready-made food, that you just need to warm it up. But then you have to take them as they are. I mean, you can't just expect too much from them, and you can't expect for that to be your project by maybe adjusting it. The problem is starting from something that has already been done or that it has already been drafted a little bit is more difficult because it takes more time. So it is a lost battle, in my opinion. It would be best to either do it all over again or maybe using the idea behind the project you just got. It happened to me. I did some book covers that, I mean, because, and I open a little bit parenthesis here, lately I am working with I take a publishing house. So the main thing I've been working on lately is the book covers. So what has happened to me is that the author of the book had already written the text, but also had used Canva to do the book cover himself, and then he sends it to you and says, "This is what I want." And that in that case, well, you use that as the initial idea that the author has in mind, and then I start that all over again with my own tools. But I wouldn't be even able to use Canva, and I would have quite, difficulties in using it. But then I don't enjoy it, so I don't use it. So when those kind of indications come, or when I get something like that, I use it as an input. The author would like to see this in his book cover, or he likes this kind of these colors, and then I use those details, and then I start over. And this is what I do often, and lately very often. Thank you. Yes, there's another question here in the chat box with regards to colors. Well, with regards to colors, if there's a difference between the light colors and the dark colors, there is a section on colors that will come later. So maybe we leave it for later. There's no need for me to answer this. Maybe if after I've done the presentation, there are more questions, or the person needs to, for this question to be clarified, I can say something. Can I say something? Because we spoke about Canva. Well, I am quite in favor of Canva. I can imagine, he says, because we are, we don't all have this big creativity. But then you said something that is very important, which is an idea. So maybe Canva can help us because it gives us an idea to do something that we like. So what we can change within the Canva project, maybe when it comes to this, we have to follow these indications within the project that you are giving us today. But then in itself, Canva really helps us at least to have an initial draft, the first few steps somehow jot down, because maybe the colors and all the other things will follow, and we should follow maybe our brand, for example. I don't know. But then creativity, when it comes to creativity, it helps a little bit. Yes, it is true. And this is what I had in mind. As you said, you had told me that often you use Canva or other tools that help you in your job and in, you know, doing your job when it comes to communication planning and making these kind of projects. But then the important thing is that whenever you use tools that can simplify your life, you are aware when you manage things and the elements within it, when you modify Canva projects, they're often well made, they're well reasoned, those are not just projects that are objectively ugly. The risk is, however, that when you try to change them or to modify them, then mistakes are done. Mistakes are made that then make the project wrong or even ugly. So, if we intervene on something that is already made, let's avoid doing things that can ruin it because, it started well and it might end badly. So, you have to be careful. So what I'm telling you here is has the attempt or the objective to make you more aware. Now, study and developing skills is what will help you and will make the difference in the end. Should I carry on? It seems there's a problem with Spanish translation. I have exhausted the interpreter. Uh, the speaker is joking. It seems Spanish translation is not working at the moment. I hope English is working and you can follow as we're going quite quickly.
Per le traduttrici un attimo. La traduttrice spagnola può parlare?
Eh,
Perfetto.
Stos. Cambia posizione, amore. Ho già cambiato tutto. E allora prendi l'altra pastiglia. Le altre pastiglie che avevi ieri nello zaino, quella lì per il male, prenditi quella.
Una richiesta di riprendere, se è possibile, le 5 punti dall'inizio.
There's a request about the 5 tips. Maybe if you could somehow go over that again, maybe clarifying those points. Apologies before the mic was on. Should I just show them again or tell them again? So the first one, the second, that is grids are not cages but starting points. The use of white space to create visual balance. The dimensions or sizes, creating visual hierarchies, that is the levels, and then the different colors that convey different meanings and emotions. And the change depending on the context. And then design, the closing, the last one, design is beautiful if it's useful. And it must be both useful and beautiful and not just one or the other. Thank you. Okay then. So now let's start speaking about font. So,
Ciascuna delle rappresentazioni grafiche delle lettere dell'alfabeto disegnate secondo le stesse regole in un determinato stile, ma sono anche l'insieme dei tratti fisici, morali e comportamentali di una persona che la
so is each of the graphic representation of the letters of the alphabet drawn according to the same rules in a given style set of physical, moral, and behavioral traits? Just like personality, you can have, you can have a very good and likable personality or not. Same thing goes here. So, uh, the personality of our works varies based on the font that we use, and it will determine if you have a certain style or another, because if a manifest uses more classical fonts because of the choice that has been made, and it will make a difference. Why? Because, and that's why the word in itself, now, it's. For us, it's both. It has to do with the composition, but also it has to do with the personality of a person. Character is character like of the letters, but also of the person. So the personality. So it somehow matches, and also it varies based on your culture. So the two different groups are the macro groups. To simplify here, are serif and serif and sans serif or sans serif. In Italian, they say graziati serif, and sans serif is bastoni. So they have a translation for that, and we use both in Italian. So serif are the ones that have these little sides here. So what we have here, those protuberances that you have at the end of each symbol, this is what we refer to, because they make the design more likable. And those not sans serif are the simpler ones, which are not nice to see somehow, or just normal. So we have these two macro areas. You can have different nomenclatures that we are just gonna be forgetting about. As you can see here, the serif makes a difference. You see these elements, those elements that somehow add to the letter. So, and there's a contrast between the vertical elements of a letter or others where the depth or the thickness in itself is not so visible. So, Sanf and Sensanf. In the two groups, you can include, as an example, this is that is serif, sorry, and sans serif is what allows you to consider in these two groups those that are the more common ones. So, for example, for the serif, you have Helvetic, Arial, and Futura, or for the sans serif, you have Times, Garamond, Bardoni, Bodoni, which are the most common ones. Those are quite common and are more representing the past. Helvetica instead has to do more with the 60s. All of these have a great story, and they are part of history and are part of a big project. Now, obviously, we have thousands, and these are only like the tip of the iceberg, because the truth is that the variety has developed and has become an endless sea, because you have variations of variations. So just think that when in using my tools, which are Photoshop and others, what I use as a font in the font palette, I have 450 fonts that I choose among. But then they all have different characteristics, so each one has a different shade. So it's like for a painter, you need to know where to select the color, and you need to choose a font instead of another. So basically, I use 1,000, but then there are tens of thousands of fonts. And here, once again, which one to use? Well, the best is to use the simple ones, the historical ones, or the ones that don't have too many decorations, because variations over variations, the development variations have led to fonts that don't really have much sense, have been changed too much, in my opinion. I still often use Garamond often, especially for communications in the religious world, for example, where you need to be elegant but also serious, and you need to express things in a certain way. So, in order for that to happen, we don't exclude using a character that has 500 years and that actually conveys that message. So why you need to look for something that is actually not, out of the box? Why do you have to think out of the box when you actually can use something from the box that can really help you achieve your goal? And then families. The fun families are, as we have said, are serif, sans serif, and then, however, you also have scripts, the script ones, which are the cursive, the ones, and the decorative ones, which are a bit more of a fantasy style. They try to convey modernity or elements such as elements that might not be useful, such as liveliness. So you need to be careful when you use them. Best would be to use simpler things. And then this is something nice that I found on the internet and that I have included in my presentation because I found it to be very well done. And here you have the 10 rules of how you use fonts, rules of typography. The first one says, learn to read your font family. That is what we have in our computer. So know your font family is get to know what you have in your computer. So for example, you might have already in your computer 20 different fonts. Try to learn them, look at them, go through them without just looking for more because you already have many in there. 1004 I said, well, it's difficult that I go and look for more. And knowing them well, it might be good that I might go and look for one that I don't have because of a specific thing, but because of this is a crazy way of using fonts, but then this is not you. So you need to start by learning and knowing the basic ones. So, for example, if they all use accents, how the capitals come out, how the small letters, small caps, or big caps, come out whenever you choose that font, etc. So to know them. Second thing is to combine a sans serif font with a serif one. So a rule of combining two different fonts. The best one. Is the best combination is the one to include sans serif with serif one because if you use Garamond and Times within the thing you're doing, it's a mistake because you're using two fonts that actually are part of the same font family or font group. So the best harmonious composition would be if the heading is using a serif, then you should use for the subtitle sans serif font. If you want to give continuity, you need to use the same font and the same font from the same family. It's useless to use a similar one but different. They just use the same. But then item 2 says for the correct balance between two fonts, it's best for one to belong to the serif family and the other one to the sans serif family. I had already said that, and then I had shown you, I had sent a few examples maybe, right? Now, the third item is exactly the opposite, that is combine heading with serif with sans serif. So you could have the main heading with serif and the subtitle with sans serif, or the other way around, as we said before. So you can have Minion, Castel, Garamond. Those are the names. Those are the names of the fonts. So the first case is to combine, as we said, a sans serif heading with a serif subtitle, for example. So the first level, the is a serif. It uses a serif font, and the other one, the subtitle, a sans serif, or the other way around. And then point four says combining two similar fonts is not nice. You don't get a nice effect, as we had said. Million with novelty, or Garamond with Times New Roman. Those combinations won't have the pleasant effect that you might expect. Obviously, sometimes it might even bother, aesthetically. So you should avoid using that kind of combination. Contrast, as it says here under item 5, contrast is the key. More the two fonts are different, the better the result. So if you combine a Futura with Castle, for example, where they have also different weight and different width, is also a better gets also a better result. And then a mistake that often happens is that when we do a composition or we choose a composition, we should avoid using too many fonts. Stick to only, you have to reduce the choice. Stick to only two fonts, says. Three if you must. Three is already too much. It's already a risk choosing three. Three if you must, it says. Stick to only two fonts, three if you must. And that's true. What you can see here, the combinations that you see here, you see it's a combination of three. But it's not really needed to have three, and then you'll see why later on in a few slides ahead that every font, not always, but often, has more than one variation. You have lighter of the same of Garamond. You have Garamond, Garamond bold, semi bold, semi bold. You have the italic Garamond, which is in cursive, semi bold, italic Garamond. So the same font or the same family. It includes already a variety of the same type that allows you to choose lighter ones or heavier ones or wider ones. Now, of some, you might only have one version, and then that's when you need to choose a second one. But then the best compositions are the ones where you choose one font and its various declinations. And then quickly, let's move on to the other ones. Number 7, don't mix different moods. When we speak about moods, we're referring here to what a font might tell us. Some are quite lively, others are more serious. Now, the combination with more than one font might not always get a good result. So, especially when the moods are different, such as the examples that you see here. To put different moods together creates confusion. They each have such a strong personality, those fonts that we have seen, that we have here as an example, that to just place another one next to them, it just creates confusion and chaos. So in that case, it's best just to stick to one and not three that then created this different mood because they're so different. And then number 8, combine font from complementary moods and similar time periods. Over time, different fonts have been created and developed. That is, in the 50s, certain fonts were created. If you use a font from the 50s and a font from the 30s, you create a temporal confusion, aesthetical temporal confusion, because there are studies that make them identify different periods and different realities. So the suggestion here would be to use fonts that are contemporary and that express the same mood and also that belong to the same time frame, the same period in which they were created. Because that allows for uh, more relevance. Now,
E il 10
nine is what I said before. And then it says, and finally,
meglio nella vita è meglio evitarli.
avoid some. There are some that is best to avoid,
Sans,
such as Comic Sans, which has been demonized, or Vina Crista. There are many, many, many that is best just to leave them aside, not use them. They're objectively ugly. They don't help us. They just complicate our life and ruin our project. Our project can be the best in the world, and then we use one of those, and then we've just killed it.
Una domanda concreta.
A question, a concrete question. Can we find this panel or this table on the internet? Yes, yes, I found it on the internet. Yes, you can find it.
Sì, sì, non c'è. Li condividiamo questi strumenti.
I can share, yes, of course, I can share my presentation so you can use the tools that I'm sharing here, no problem.
Sì, 5
So
minuti, perfetto.
we only have 5 more minutes. Okay, so then here we see a few fun families.
Times, Garamond,
So
Baskerville.
Times, Garamonda, Baskerville, Bodoni, Rockwell.
Poi ce
You
n'è
see, those are all self ones, and then you have some that are sense which are historical, beautiful fonts.
questo è stato messo, l'ho messo.
Leggings, it's here just to show you something that looks like if it has been written handmade, by hand with a marker. It's quite spontaneous, not beautiful, but it can be used because sometimes it's nice. And then the Schnell Roundhand, which is a cursive classic handwriting that can be used for wedding invitations or a formal invitation, for example. Also, the sensitivity is required. That is to understand that to do a wedding invitation, maybe it's good to use this, but not that one. And it's not something that you would just give for granted because knowing the different fonts gives you that awareness that, okay, I have. So maybe I have a gala dinner, I need to do an invitation. Maybe I best use this one, or maybe I use a font that is better than another. So you might want the serif one or a sans serif one, depending on what you want to convey as a message. And then maybe you could write it in a cursive or maybe sans serif, no long text in cursive. English cursive writing is not best. Maybe just the name of the spouses can be written, in a cursive serif font, and then everything else written in a sans serif because then this gives some lightness to the to the invitation, and also it makes it easier for the reader. This one we can skip because we'll see it later. Let's just move on to the last page to conclude. So, what I would like to say is a light character, a character that or a font that might need to express lightness, but we can use something like the one you see here in the middle of the page, a font like that, to speak about lightness,
Il colore in questo caso
So, for example, you need to desaturate it. For example, if we wanted to communicate the lightness, the first one, the first font is lighter than the second one, but then that lightness, or that heaviness, excuse me, can be lightened up by diminishing the intensity of the font. So, for example, you have different versions of a font. You have the lighter, the middle, and the heavier.
di rendere il carattere pesante leggero.
So you can make a heavy font lighter by doing or applying certain changes. And now we stop here and we carry on after the break.
Certo. Sì, no.
Potrebbe indicarci un'applicazione.
Could you mention an app that could help us work, even if we're not experts, with some design? I mean, if we can be helped something that can help us. I don't know the answer to this question. I mean, an app, a tool non-professional tool, I wouldn't know. So that's my problem. What I use is Adobe Suite, Photoshop, Illustrator, Design, Ecoc Express. But then, for the layout, but then instruments such as that, the one you're mentioning are Canva or maybe others that exist that have templates and that are somehow, they have some ready-made information or projects about Canva that you have mentioned and I have had the opportunity to see, but I don't know many of that. The non-professional ones, I don't know any that I could suggest. The other question about the creation of a poster or a postcard, what is the best way to choose a group of persons to choose what the graphic design to use. It should be a one person job or a group of persons working on it. Is it a job that requires consensus? What do you mean with that? I'm not sure I understood as a speaker. Within the graphic choices, I know. She's explaining that. Should you place one person, a group of persons within the graphic design, within the project? Well, it depends what you're trying to convey, the message. If it's a pilgrimage to the Holy Land, maybe having more people is, better than just having one single person. That means, okay, what, nobody went there or nobody wants to go? So the visual message needs to be clearly connected with the message that we're trying to convey. So the answer to your question is it depends. It depends on the context. Yes, exactly. Because it really varies on the need, what you need to convey. There is no rule. You always need to place many elements. No, there's no another question, but maybe we could answer it after the break. Okay, then. So we have a half an hour break, and we'll be coming back at the top of the hour. Thank you. See you later. Once again, welcome. I hope translation is working. So once again, welcome. Hello. So let's carry on with what we were speaking when we were talking about fonts. Now, these are some families, the font families that we had taken just as an example, just to show you how certain font has a very articulated family. So you see, if you wanted to use this font, you could have here, all the different types. So the air thin, light, regular, medium, bold, black. So, and then inside a certain composition, you even have more variations. That what is suggested is that you don't use too many fonts. And when a font has such a wide family, such as this one, to use only one. And then the different variations. This is just an example, but then there are many other. So here, for example, you have different variations for the same font. You can have uh, bold, thicker than font and or lighter depending, and then this allows you to make a much more harmonic combination without varying fonts. Another example, same family with a lot of variety and options. Here you have another one. This one is another example. Franklin has all these different declinations which are very useful that go from thin, which is the thinnest, to black, which is the thicker one. But then it goes through almost 10 different graduations, 10 different levels of the same character. Same thing. You have bold, semi-bold, or the round fonts. The third, the fourth, and the fifth are italic. Well, you have the bold ones, and you have the italic one, which are the cursive types of the same font. This is another one. Here you have another example. The lorem ipsum thing is a little text that often happens when you have graphic projects. When you want to add a fake text, you choose a text that comes from Latin, from Cicero, which is slightly changed. And it serves it uses is used to make us think that it's a reason text. It wouldn't happen if we would just have access to fill space. It wouldn't happen. So whenever we have a project and the text is not yet available,
tendono ad usare un testo
so what graphic designers do is they use a fake text, which is the one that you see here, lorem ipsum dolor. You find it on the internet. If you write on the internet lorem ipsum, it gives you the full text that you can use in projects. Whenever you're waiting for a real text, instead of just writing whatever, you just write this, and it gives you an idea of the final effect whenever you have the final text and the final version. When you only use X's or just letters, it won't show the same beauty. So this gives us an idea of how it will come out. Then obviously the real text will come in, and then it will just change again, but it will be much more similar to the final version. And this is a trick that graphic designers do. So for example, I don't have the text as the clients, but then foresee 10 lines of text, and then that's what the designer does. It uses lorem ipsum, and then the text will substitute what you have placed there in Latin. And now here also basic concepts still, but they are very important. So when it comes to text and when you have three different kinds, so you can have them aligned in different ways. So you justify it on both sides, just on the right, just on the left.
invece non ha un allineamento
And then the one in the middle has no justification, and then which is in the middle.
dentro ed epigrafe si usava appunto per le lapidi,
So this was used for communications, for things of a certain importance, tombstones. So
testi al centro,
where you need things to be centered.
quindi testi ad epigrafe messi un po' da una parte e non è il massimo.
Sometimes you have, for example, tombstones that are a bit justified to the right, but that's not right. If it's not centered, then it doesn't have any meaning. So if it has to be on one side of a composition, best to have a right flag or a left flag. But then, if it's not in the middle, totally in the middle, then it's missing a little bit the point of using the one that has no justification. No. It's just like
È semplicemente una nota di
it feels like if it was a discordant note somehow, you know?
poi ci sono i testi giustificati,
And then you have you have
testo ci può
text like this where it's justified right or left, or then you also could have or not have the interruption of the word. So, for example, on the left, the text
la parola perché
interrupts
riga
sends the word to the next line because it doesn't fit, then it just adjusts
però
so that it goes down, but then the next one, the one on the side, doesn't have that. And then certain spaces are created which are not nice to be seen. So whenever the text is justified, then it's good for syllabation for the
dei clienti
to
che
happen. I have had clients who said, "Yes,
ma senza sillabazioni
could you do it like this, but without, being, yeah, without the interruption of the words?" And I would show that. I would show them that there would be holes. I said, "Can you take that off? Or can you just not have those spaces?" So yes, yeah. If you want that, if you can do that, if you have to consider syllabification. If you don't, then you have to do it differently. You have to consider a flag text or an unflagged text because then words are not interrupted and they just move on to the next line of rows. So then you have the flag text,
quella forma piuttosto che l'altra.
which is the one that chooses a certain shaped and not another. And if you don't want to use syllabification because somebody has an allergy to that, then better not to justify the text, because immediately if you choose that, then that generates some holes or some spaces that are not really nice to be seen. So now,
farvi vedere un po' la varietà e anche la
just to show you some variety and also the difference, the different emotions that this might create. If we look at this, for example, and we picture it and consider it, it might be elegant, but then it's not or may not. So it has given us an idea. So, for example, this is a font that is more modern, maybe, or not, that it can be used for something or not specifically clarified.
carattere storico. Caratteri, poi ci sono caratteri più vivaci,
And then you have fonts that are more lively,
Brody, che è stato un
such as Neville Brody, which was a very Neville Brody, sorry, that was a very famous U.S. Designer, graphic designer, who
dove appunto le lettere
had this characteristic where the letters
sottili,
were more or less thin, or as if they were blown up. You can see this last line. It was like
la scritta.
if it was a balloon, it was inflated, the letter. And for certain things, this is right. It could be helpful, but then it's useless. It goes without saying, but I will say it. I wouldn't use this font for the cover of the encyclical of the Pope, for example. I mean, it's something that goes without saying, but we should say it because maybe somebody might think, hey, let's do something weird or different. Better not, because things
Che dobbiamo
they have already the direction. They somehow indicate it, show us the direction that needs to be followed, and we need to keep at it and just comply with it. And then yes, we have historical fonts, Bodoni, Helvetica, variation of Helvetica.
questo è il Traian, un carattere
This is the Trian, which is something that comes from the writings on the Trianos column. So it's quite nice. So this is something I would use for a papal document, for example, an historical and elegant font that also gives some importance to what we want to communicate in an elegant way. There's also uh, sans serif version that is also good. For example, that you have up here. It's a beautiful font, in my opinion. I often did use it for important events of a certain level, also in the religious field, but not only,
importanza, perché
for very important events, because it really speaks about importance, this font.
altro genere, Futura è un carattere
Different font, Futura. Futura was born in the 30s after the Second World War. It was used a lot during fascism. It's a font that is quite rigid, that is somehow it's still used. It's quite imposing, and it has different
attuale ancora, nonostante
shades. And even though it has around 100 years, since it was invented, it's still used a lot and works still quite well. And then we have horrible things, such as this ones. These are distorted, you know, or ruined fonts. That's how we refer to them. That have a very limited use, maybe only for musical things. Like a rock group, might do its own
però ecco, è importante che
I don't know, CD or whatever with this kind of font. But then the content needs to be very specific. It can't just be used anywhere. There are no prohibitions, but then the fonts need to be used in the right moment, especially this kind of fonts for the specific thing that we have foreseen. You have more here. And then the last thing that we have to say about the font is that fonts have their own historical record, and they have its own reference, historical period reference. So this is a font from the 20s and the 30s, the core Charleston. It really reminds us of a specific period in time, and it's good to know
storia dei caratteri,
beyond the story of the fonts. Futura is 100 years old, for example, but nobody uh,
moderno,
avoid nobody prohibits us to use it for a modern project, because maybe you're presenting a company that is speaking about technological innovation and is just presenting itself on the market, and this is why we could use it. But then beyond the history that there's behind the font, it's also important to know what it's communicating. For example, this is a font which is quite typical from the 30s, and it can be used to do the cover of The Great Gatsby, for example, or for a movie that has as a heading Charleston in the 30s, then it's good to use a font that actually recalls or makes you think of that period. And then there was a study and a different style for every period. So in the 50s, for example, it's a time in which, especially in the States, this kind of aesthetics was the rule, and it was this is what we had, which is connected to the world of surf and California, and California vibes and good vibes. But then it's a very specific aesthetic. It has a very specific aesthetic that is connected with a very specific period in time. So to use characters or to use a font that reminds us of a specific period needs to be used accordingly, because if not, it can create problems. Fonts like this one connects with the 70s. So this reminds us of the 70s, psychedelic colors, psychedelic fonts that were handmade and that had some kind of specific objective. You should avoid that, obviously, for something that speaks about current times, because they come with its own history and somehow also express it. This is also connected with the 70s, and I hope that this element comes through, that gets through, that you understand it. This is something that uses more colors, more lively colors, or this one from the 80s again, this style that is much more connected with the 80s. This is very typical of the 80s. And then here we speak about combinations, and then the font pairing. Font pairing, as we said before, this pairing is all, these are all very correct font pairings. Why? Because you have the different kinds. So senf, senf, and then they can serif, sans serif, and we can combine them and mix them and pair them without being afraid of making a mistake. One is serif, one is sans serif, and then this is the happiest of marriages. It's the perfect combination. Other examples of font pairing. So all these are recent font pairings, so that you can alternate a serif and a sans serif font, but also where you can add in the mix also more lively fonts, such as this one here at the bottom, Grand Hotel one, which is more or less written as if it had been handwritten in combination with a serif in its simplicity, which somehow creates some contrast with the liveliness of the heading. So when we do this pairing, we always need to balance the two things, and it goes without saying that all the combinations that you have here, when you have a bigger lettering, is combined with is paired with something quite minimal in style. It's a minimalistic style, because it would be very difficult to pair it with a font that is as lively without creating chaos. Other examples of font pairing: elegant fonts, serif ones, which also pair well with the sans serif ones and with the script ones. However, also knowing how to pair them with a little bit, of sensitivity that can also be tuned over time. And then this is all I have to say about the fonts. Now, if you had questions, we can answer them. If not, we can move on to the next topic, which is color.
Sì,
Please, if you could go back to the slides.
io non ho le cuffie. Vabbè, non è che siamo...
Just a minute, he has no headphones, so just a second. He has no headphones, so just give him a minute so he can put on headphones and hear the translation. Thank you. I do understand a little bit of English, the speaker says, but it's best to hear the translation just in case, he says.
Okay, thank you. I was asking if you could please go back to two slides, the two last slides before this one. Mm, no, yes, please. I just wanted to ask whether, for instance, Futura, if you have to use the two, must it go with Bodoni, or why do you put them side by side?
E li mette insieme proprio perché fanno
Well,
parte
it combines them exactly because they belong to the two opposite macro areas. So it's like Helvetic and Garamond. Futura and Bodoni, yes, I understand. Maybe it would be best to have a lighter Bodoni because of the Bodoni font. We have lighter versions and lighter um, options, and maybe you have Bodoni book would fit better probably when it comes to this kind of Futura in combination with this Futura, maybe the Bodoni that we have here might just prevail a bit too much. But then maybe they could be inverted. So maybe you could do the headings with the Bodoni font and then the underlying text with Futura. The two fit together, even though Bodoni was created actually many years before the Futura font. The contrast that the two together create makes them fit together, makes them a good fit. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. But does it go with all the other fonts? All these other fonts that you have presented?
Sì, sì, assolutamente. Questi sono
Yes, yes, of course. These are just examples. These are just some examples. Let's, think that I have 1,400 fonts. Then consider how those 1,400 fonts combine among themselves. Here you only have 10 examples among 100 and more combinations that you might create. So, Bodoni in this case might also fit with Helvetica, for example,
all'inizio della...
which you have here at the beginning of the page. Certainly, I would never place Garamond and Bodoni together because they are two fonts belonging to the same family, which would create a contrast. It would be better to combine them with others. I had a question. I have a question, says Sister Jacqueline. We're speaking to young people. And then there are different categories of youth. So maybe this is a bit of a complicated question, but what kind of font? What kind of font should we use? What would be more appropriate?
È chiaro, ne
No, no, I understand. It's clear. We were speaking about that exactly during the break with someone here. That obviously who we are referring to or who are we trying to speak to makes a difference. Even in the religious field,
correttezza estetica e
you need to choose. I mean, it's important to make to do some good planning to really make a project that keeps that in mind. So, for example, if we are speaking to teenagers, for example, because the parish is organizing a meeting with them, then the language will be different from, and the funds will be different from the ones that you might be organizing and that you are making invitation for a more formal event. So there is no clear recipe when it comes to this, but what is really important is that you know who is the interlocutor, who is your target. So, are we speaking to children? Well, then, if the target is children, then it needs to be lively, colorful, maybe a font that is not too formal. And all this will make the communication for the target receiving it something that will make them feel sync and that is more coherent to them. If it's too formal, if it looks too dull and too boring for a boy who is 10, obviously he might not even read it. So, the objective that of what we have produced is useless. Thank you.
Prego, posso io
Yes,
fare una domanda?
I have a question. Yes.
Cosa fare se il font selezionato non
What
contiene la
should we
lingua
do
della mia lingua?
if the font that I have chosen doesn't adapt to my language? Well, then you change the font. But I know it does happen that certain letters and certain letters with an accent might not be uh, foreseen in the font. So, what if you're writing something short, such as a short sentence, and that word doesn't have the accent that we need? Then it happens to me as well. It's happened that then you need to create it yourself. So maybe you decompose a letter that has the accent and then physically you paste it to the letter that doesn't have it by using that same font. You can do this if this is happening in a short text. Then, if it's a whole page full of text, and then you have to do this for every letter, obviously, and adding accents where where they don't come automatically, then maybe that's too complicated. Some fonts are not complete. So, for example, I work with a magazine since many years now for the Monastery of Santa Rita of Kasha, and I have been working on this magazine for many years, and we do this in 7 languages, and this is we do it in English, Spanish. When we were using basic languages, everything went well. It was a bi-monthly thing. Now Polish is being used, it's been included. And the Polish language has, characters and designs that don't belong to our own aesthetics and our own culture. And that's why we were obliged for the Polish version to change the font because there was no way of using the font that we were using for the other languages because it had nothing. It had none of the glyphs that the language has. So the little line, the horizontal line, the weird accents on the vocal, on the consonants. So what we had been using, the font we had been using for 50 years, it just didn't include those. So we had to use something similar but different that would include those glyphs. So whenever it doesn't work. If it's just an accent, well, you can work on it. But if it's more, if when it's longer text and it gets complicated, it's best just to choose a different font. Thank you. Because then fonts that are created in a certain country. So a font that was created in the U.S. Well, in the U.S. They rarely have accents, so they don't have them. They don't include them. Then instead, we are using all these words in Italian as well that have accents, and that's why is why. Uh, this happens. Why is this font not considering an accent? Well, because in their language, the language in which the font was created, the accent was not needed, or at least not on that letter. He can hear himself, and this is bothering him, so he turned off something. There are two questions of two different persons. First of all, thank you for your presentation. Thank you, he says. So, which are the different styles, font styles that are more adapted to highlight names and important names or places? How can we highlight within the text a certain word without distracting the reader from the content? This is the first question. Now, the second question, another person for a more official mm, project within the church, what will you use? Well, what I suggested before. I, the second question and the first question are similar in a way, and I did say already something about that before. In a religious, serious, professional, important communication, I wouldn't use, for example, something such as the second one here at the bottom, or let's show it again. So here, this one here, the second to last at the bottom. I wouldn't use that, of course, because I would consider it a little bit ugly. And it doesn't give any idea of formality or elegance. I would use one of the first ones, Times, Garamond, Bodoni. The first four are fonts, historical fonts that actually are, evergreen, I would say, and that give you this elegant result, which is perfect, which is formal, which is exactly what you need. And I wouldn't do any experiments when it comes to this kind of documents or projects. I would use the more elegant and more important ones that are these ones. And then the second question, yes, it was about how to give relevance to a heading or to something without distracting the reader from the content. Well, you always need to somehow picture the situation because there is no rule, there is no one rule fits all, one size fits all. Basically, what I would say is the text that needs to be, the layout needs to be clearly made, clear to read, easy to read, and it has to be placed in a different level from the reading level of the heading and the image that you might have. So the visual hierarchies that we were speaking about before apply here and are the ones that truly give us the idea, the right direction, the right indication to what to do about what to do. I could so that the person reads the text at the right time so that first your what catches the eye is the heading and then is the content. So you need to find the right spaces, the right dimensions or sizes, depending on the project that you have in mind and that you're carrying out. Now, it's really difficult to just give one answer, a specific answer to this question that can, you know, maybe make the person who asked the question happy. Now, one more question before we move on to the next section. So, once again, thank you for your presentation. Now, for a longer document, are there fonts that might tire less the reader, when it comes to the eyes and also to the attention of the reader? Yes. So, those. Things like this can make it more tiring. For example, there is more lightness that don't add anything to the reading. So, for example, when a text is quite long, the main thing is to use sans that is easier, simpler fonts. Now, I have an example here that I brought for those who have problems, reading problems such as dyslexia and other issues. That there are fonts that are better when it comes to these difficulties, the physical difficulties when it comes to reading. Then specific characters or fonts are used, easy, simple ones. So in a very long text, it doesn't make sense, for example, to use very elaborated fonts. The simpler the font, the better it is, the easier it is to read. Garamond is often used in the publishing field for books and text. Why? Because even though this happens, stamped formats or fonts are used because it makes it easier for reading. Because Bidot, for example, which is a very thin font that might not be good for a long reading, you know, a long text.
Anche i caratteri con le grazie si usano per testi molto
So
lunghi. Ecco, questo per
use
esempio ha queste grazie
documents, for example, this one is very thin and it has a contrast. On a longer text, this might actually give you trouble. It's a Garamond. It's a font that is much smaller, and the differences, horizontal differences and vertical differences, are not many and not so specific, so it's easier to read. So if you think of books such as novels and such, Garamond is often used, or other fonts of the Garamond family, Dub Garamond, and there are many families connected to Garamond, to this font, that are used because are very easily read. Maybe we move on to the colors. Yes, let's move on to the colors. Here it is. So let's speak about color.
Cominciamo con un esperimento.
So let's start with an experiment. What do you say? I brought something. I have here a support, but let me see if it works. Let me see. Okay, so then if I ask you what color is this? It's white, right? This is white. Okay. It's white. What about now? Pink. Yeah, it's clear. It's pink, right? Let me see if I have a stronger color. No, it's not white anymore, but yes, it could be purple maybe. I brought this from home just to do this demonstration. So we see the paper being white because of the light, because the light is white. So we perceive the color for what it is. Now let me turn off the light, because if not, I'm gonna hurt my eyes. So we perceive this paper as white because the white light allows us to perceive it for what it is. Now let's just imagine for the sun not to, for the sunlight to be magenta or rosa or pink. We would see everything through that color. Everything would be pink. This would be pink. This would be pink. Everything would be alterated. This wouldn't be yellow, but so everything would be altered. So the light that is white makes us see it white. Now here we would see it like this, but the truth is this is a color. So this is yellow, but with a different light. The perception would be different. We would perceive it as a different color. So light is white, which is the light that surrounds us, allows us to perceive colors in the way we do. So the colors that we perceive come from the reflection of the objects. So these objects are not producing any light, they reflect it. So this is blue, this is orange. But because the white that this object mirrors is white, we see the light, the color as it is. So as we have agreed on this, and this has been explained, then we need to keep in mind that the white light contains all the colors, and that's why the rainbow, which is distribution of the light, because this the light of the sun, which is broken down by the natural presence of raindrops, makes us perceive the colors of the rainbow because of this decomposition of the light. Is decomposed through the prisms, creating the rainbow, which you see here, which is a great result of the white light of the sun passing through the natural presence of the raindrops that we have in the air that splits that light, that white light, such as a prism would do. You know, the drops work as a prism, and then the light that goes through a prism is decomposed, is altered, and creates the colors that are within the white, that are withheld by the white. And this is why one of the most known CD covers in the history of music is this concept that is black, white, and color, and it has those three elements. So, light is white. Why am I saying that light is white? Well, because we every day find ourselves looking at the screen, such as we're doing now, which produces light. Because the difference from a piece of paper, which is white, that emits light, that doesn't emit light but reflects it, sorry. Our screens instead do produce light. So how can we see all the colors that we actually see? Our monitors and all the different devices such as TVs and other screens use this system, which is what we have here on the left side, which is the additive synthesis. This is a system which tells us that if we were to have three different lights, a red one, a green one, and a blue one, where the three lights overlap, we will get white, which is what produces all the other colors if we were to decompose it. So everything that is electronical, all devices are based on this decomposition of the color, which allows us to get the different nuances and the different shades of colors. This is called additive synthesis. And where it overlaps, it creates different colors and shades. So this system, however, is completely different from a system that is used when we work on paper. When we print, we don't use the additive synthesis or system because we use ink and pigments when we print. So we don't use light. We only speak about reflected light. And then this is when we use subtractive synthesis. All these things are things that you can look up on the internet and you'll find more than enough information where you can learn more about this. I'm just giving you a few hints about this, okay? Just in general, such as it was with fonts and the different kinds of fonts and the families. Also for color, you either have additive synthesis or subtractive synthesis, depending on the case and when it's to be used. The subtractive synthesis is subtractive because it takes away light. So the overlapping of the colors that you can see here leads to having a dark color, which is quite close to what we call black, which is the outer color for the others graph on the left. So in this overlapping, where you have the three colors, that is yellow, magenta, and cyan, which is what you use for any kind of printing that you do, adding black. Why do we add black? Because the black that is created from the overlapping of these three colors is a black that is considered black with little intensity. So another color has been added, black. And this is what we use is quadricome. Why is it called like that? Because it's made up of four colors. That is cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. And this is used, the nomenclature that is being used in CM, CMYK, which is the acronym that is being used. You might have seen this whenever you are, using certain apps. Whenever when you do a picture, when you make a picture with your phone, so that you download them, they're all made with this. Or when you apply this to a project, a graphic project that will be printed, those pictures will have to be moved from an additive synthesis to a subtractive synthesis to another language, to the other language, because then this transfer from one language to the other is not automatic because they don't correspond. What we see on a video, on a screen, and what we see on paper when it comes to colors, they don't really match because the video is a source of light, and what we see printed is a refraction of light. And often we might have done something very beautiful in our computer on our screen, and we print it out, and it's not as nice as it looked on the screen. It will never be. It will never be exactly as we have it on the screen, and this is something that we have to accept. There's nothing we can do about that because what we see on the screen is a simulation of what will come out later if we print it out, and what we will do later is a simulation of what we did before. The two things will never truly match. They will be very similar. You can get to a very close level of optimal control of the differences, but you shouldn't be afraid or scared that the result when you pass from the screen to the printout, the colors don't match. I'll show you something else here. I don't know if you can perceive it here, but maybe on the screen this is not visible as much. But then the one on top is an RGB gamma color, and the one underneath is the same transformed in the quadrotomy. So on top you have the additive synthesis, and the one underneath is the one that uses the subtractive synthesis. And as you can see, some brightness of some of the colors gets lost in the second one, especially when it comes to the green, to the blue, the light blue, dark blue, on the pink, because the video helps us because it produces light. But then when you print it out, you don't use light, you use ink. And then these are two very different tools. And sometimes the result, the final result, might not be as happy as the initial result because these are two worlds that somehow cannot match or they cannot be placed together. And then a good example is the one of two different hams. You have a brand ham and a different kind of ham, you see. And yeah, the brighter one is the RGB one, and the CMYK is the other ham. And then you see it's a different color, and this is somehow what explains the two concepts. And now let's go quickly on to speak about the color wheel. The color wheel is a color theory from Eaton. He studied all his life colors and he tried to codify colors. Eaton does this. He says at the center you have the three primary colors. The three primary colors are colors that cannot be obtained by adding them to others. So they are primary colors. That's how they are born. Adding the primary colors such as yellow and blue, you get green. So this is an example that you can, try out if you buy some paint and you mix the colors. If you buy the three primary colors, yellow, red, and blue, you can obtain all the ones that you have around it just by mixing them up. So yellow with blue creates green, red with blue creates violet, this very dark violet, yellow with red creates orange. So what you see here are the primary colors, that is yellow, and then orange. For example, orange is a secondary color. That's how they're called. They're called secondary colors because they are generated by the sum of the two primary colors. Now, if you add a primary and a secondary color, if you mix a primary color and a secondary such as yellow and orange, you get a yellow-orange that is a tertiary color, which is a lighter orange. So primary, secondary, and tertiary colors. This is how the wheel was created, and it's a wheel with 12 different colors. And it shows the different possibilities, basically because the colors are just millions. There are millions of colors. So here we only speak about 12. It's a 12-part color circle. And Johannes Eaton, has given us an idea of a color wheel that is generated by the sum of the three basic colors. And if we split up this wheel, We have a side where we have the orange, the reds, and the yellows where the colors are warm, and the other one where we have the cool colors. Warm colors and cool colors. So yellow, green are cool colors. So half is warm, half is cool. So this is what I just told you, but then with the different names. Now, the complementary colors. Are a secondary and a primary color. So the combination yellow has a complementary color, violet, the violet, which is the secondary color of the sum of the other two. I hope that is easier to understand if you can see it more than if you hear it narrated by me. Now, the complementary colors are those that are not part of the secondary colors. The complementary colors are the colors are the ones opposite to the primary colors. They're opposite to one another in the color wheel, such as the orange. You see, opposite to the orange, you don't have here the blue. So what it means? Why do you need this? Is to create contrast, and you can know that a color has a better contrast with another, and the wheel helps you understand that and identify that contrast. Black and white are achromatic colors, so they are used to add or take away intensity to a color to make it darker or lighter. But then we are always speaking here about the colors from an artistic perspective. When we use black and white paint to make a color lighter, it's fine. But then when it comes to print and typography, printing world, white doesn't exist actually. It does exist when it comes to light, but then in a product such as this one, any book, even this one here, for example, that I have here, there is no white. The white doesn't exist. White is the support, the paper. Paper is white. So we normally use those four colors: cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. How do we get white? By not placing any color. So whenever you want white to appear, well, you don't add any color. So if this book had been printed on yellow, we wouldn't see any white. We wouldn't have any white because typographic colors don't cover. They were born to be overlapped. So whenever you overlap two colors, when you print it, then other colors are generated. If not, you will just see the last color that has been printed. So colors are transparent, they overlap, and they create the color that we see. In the end, in the next slide, you will understand this better. But then white, the color white, when printing, doesn't exist. You only get it through the lack of color. So these are the primary colors, these are the secondary colors, and these are the tertiary colors. And this is quite simple, but then we can also do this. We could also imagine combinations of colors with opposite colors, that are on the opposite side of the color wheel, and we can create very strong contrast. So if they are opposite to one another, the contrast will be higher, the highest possible. And then there are consequential ones, which are the colors that are one next to the other, and then the contrast will be less. They will be more harmonious. These are contrasts, are strong, are colors with a strong contrast. But then you can also use contrast in a different way, as if it was a triangle. So you can take the color and then you don't use the two opposites, but you use combination of divergent or semi-complementary complements or colors. So for example, uh, depending on the distance, maybe you could consider four colors that are separated by four other colors among them. These are triadic harmonies. This is how they're called. I'm not sure if it's translatable, he says. Okay, or also quadratic ones. Now, I know that when it comes to theory, it might not make sense, but then when you apply it, you will see that this is quite harmonic. It makes a very harmonious. It has a very harmonious result, and then you have less contrast. These colors are better when used together. But then, just to show you a few examples where this applies, in the real world, for example. So you understand. So in order for this logo to be developed, two complementary colors were chosen.
Due colori complementari. Non necessariamente nelle gradazioni che riporta lo schema.
Not in the
Ma
in the gradation that you might see here, but then if you want, because they wanted to create a strong contrast, two colors that are opposite on the color wheel were chosen, such as in this case, the opposite complementary colors for the IKEA sign.
questo per esempio, ecco, nell'utilizzo di
Here instead, they here use three different colors for the 7-Up.
questo,
Here
scelta dei colori
for the ice cream, Samontana Gelati ice creams, the color choice uses three different colors from the color wheel.
alla fine altro non ha che
This other one here, we know it very well, the Google one. It has four colors
che praticamente il contrasto
chosen from the color wheel.
tra quattro colori
And then the contrast is the greatest contrast that you have among opposite colors within the color wheel. This one as well, the Microsoft Square.
quattro colori meglio
Having to choose four colors,
un po'
well, the best thing is to choose the colors that are actually
analoghi perché sono appunto molto vicini e armonici
that are equidistant from one another. Here they are more harmonious.
e sono finiti gli esempi e questo
And then the examples are done. And then here instead, this is a way to see how similar or the same color can change when placed next to another color,
viola
such as yellow and violet.
hanno degli effetti diciamo
You see, the effect is different
in una parte diciamo primaria rispetto
when you have them at the center or around it, surrounding it. So you remember the black and white circles?
di dimensioni
You remember that even though they have the same size, one looks bigger? Well, this is because also here, color makes us have or get a different dimension. You see, when you have the yellow square within the
ha un peso, una forza
the
diversa.
purple
Questi sono tutti
the purple frame makes it look bigger than the one next by, where you have the frame in yellow. So these are very extreme examples of color combinations that show us different kinds
viola al centro dei due riquadri è lo stesso
a big range of combinations. This is what we can see here. So, for example, here
rosso
you have different backgrounds. For example, the red background is not as lively. This is more lively when you use yellow because it's a complementary color to purple.
appare diverso
So, purple looks different because the context has changed.
così come un quadrato
Same thing goes here. Yellow square and
il contrasto maggiore tra
a
due
gray background.
percepiamo la
So you see, contrast is stronger
queste
whenever colors are opposite colors in the wheel. So here, this is something that we've said already. Compositions,
questo per tornare un attimo
and then
all'interferenza che vi dicevo prima tra il mondo
this is to speak about
tecnologia e il
this
mondo
basket, fruit basket, is to go back to this comparison between
binari paralleli
paper print and digital images. Here you have a beautiful
se andiamo ad
basket
ingrandire
of fruit. So whatever you see here on the screen, if you make it bigger, then what you see is a roster of little squares. This is what you see, which together create,
vicino creano l'immagine
not seen as so close, not as a close-up, the image. Now, if you look at
solo in
the same image, but
questo è quello che succede
not so close, this is what you see. This is what happens on a screen and a TV and all devices. All digital devices work like this. In the printing world, we have the four colors. The sum of those four colors is what allows us to see an image in color. But then if we make it bigger, if we that is cyan, magenta, yellow, and black, then we will discover that there is no raster that we had seen before that we would see if we just zoom in the picture on the screen. But instead, on the printout, if we zoom in, we see many little dots. So what we see here, on the left we have a raster, and on the right side we have a detailed view in print because when printing, the overlapping of different dots or points allows us to see all the colors. But the truth is that what we have, the colors of those dots, are only in cyan, magenta, yellow, and black, actually. What we see here is a shade that we would see on a computer screen because the shade that we see here is a gradation of the light going from white to black. So we don't see any defect, any visible defect. However, when we print this, in order to have that same effect of the shades, if we want to have a shade, then we can't use a gray. Gray is doesn't exist when we print. Uh, when we see gray, it means using a little bit of black. So we need to know that in order to have a gray shade when printing, then we need a grid of little dots that go from very small to very big in order to create this fullness that leads to black. So there's a lot of difference, of course. These little dots are made here bigger. We are zooming in and out. When we print it, then it doesn't show like that. But then the printed images are made up by many, many, many little dots. Like an image like this one in black and white can be seen if we look at it normal, but then if you make it bigger, then you'll notice that it's made up of many little dots. The closer the dots, more the color gets darker. The more space in between them, the more you reach white. So white appears only because there's a lack of black. Because as I said, white doesn't exist when we print. It's only the lack of color. So here, this cover, the heading here is white. Why? Because there was no ink placed there. So the black. The layout the background was black, and then because nothing was printed there in black, then it remains white. And here, what I was saying, that if an image is printed on a white paper, we will see the white of the wall, the white of the skin, the white of the inside of the orange, and we see those whites because the print hasn't printed the color. Instead, if the paper is yellow or pink or blue, this will be the result, and so we will we will alterate the result of the image. So this is to say that if we were to print a book on an ivory paper, ivory color paper, then everything would be ivory. So if there's a picture printed, everything would have some kind of ivory element in it, you know. If we were to print a picture of a glacier on it, then it wouldn't look white as a glacier would look, but it would be yellowish. Why? Because the paper is the support that allows us for white to exist when printing. Quickly. So the palette, this is a color wheel or color plant that has defined the color through numbers. Every color is identified with a number, and there are 2,390 different ones. So that is it's a very wide range of colors, of palettes of colors with the different gradations. Now, this is a convention of colors. Okay, and last but not least, I'm showing you now the funniest thing, that is the contrast between before and after. So these are projects that I received and that I try to improve or enhance. Hopefully I did manage. I'll show you a few examples. So this is the first one. This is a magazine that speaks about wine and luxury. That's the title, actually, wine and luxury. So this is a magazine that I was entrusted with a few years ago, and that when I received, the client said, until now, this is what we've done, and this is our last cover. So this is the last cover. So he gives me this, and I ask myself, I wonder, because I see so many mistakes here. I see many mistakes, such as where the text was placed, the positioning of the text with all this empty space on the right to write things overlapping the image. For me, that's really wrong. Especially, there is no harmony when it comes to the distribution of space. It's true that white space or empty space is important, but then if it's just wasted, then that's a mistake. And then the writing up there is good. It has this shade. You have this white heading on a white shaded background, and then this person with this glass, with this, you know, here Giovanni line. This is not Paolo Belle. So I mean, it's not the same person. The person you see there is not the person that is mentioned up here. So what I said or what I did was to reorganize the elements. I kept the same dish but cooked differently, but with the same ingredients. So this is what I did. So it was simple. What I did, I moved the text in the space that could contain them without the text overlapping over the image. I took away the shade of the background on the upper side of the page, which was useless, and then moved the image in a way. And then I believe that the way I did this created Giovanni Lai, he is Giovanni Lai, who his passion for wine. So the name is next to the person. So you know that this person is the one you see here. Up there, it was written Giovanni Lai, but then you wouldn't really connect the name with the person on the cover. So this is what I did. This is another example. This is something I did for parish, the parish San Roberto Lanino. When I got there, they told us that this is our um, what can we do here? This is our letterhead, right? This is our letterhead. What can you do for it, for us? Oh, I can do a lot, I thought. So I looked a little bit at the architecture of the church. I tried to look for elements that could be used graphically. And then I finally found, looking at different corners of the church, this window on top of the organ, which was really nice, which is something that often appears in the architecture of many churches. So I used it to create this very simple logo that also includes the cross somehow, which in a way is coherent with the message also that we're trying to convey. And I created this letterhead the logo that then I added in the letterhead, which made it very different from the previous one. I would say it's more lively, and that I also then used in the different projects as leaflets and also other products that were produced for the same parish, giving some continuity and which was a bit different from how the previous letterhead had been produced, which was probably done, I don't know, maybe 20, 30, 50 years before. This is another thing that I did for the same parish where the logo, in a way, is quite fitting, in my opinion. This is another thing that I did, not this here, but this is another job that I got from the Pauline. They said, this is a leaflet. We would like to, it's like a poster that we want to use to speak about this book that is going to come out. So what I did was I changed it. I totally changed it. You see, here, once again, what I try to do to create a visual hierarchy. So the first main thing that needs to catch your eye is the image of the gospel and the title. Well, the title first and then the gospel, and then everything else you can read it in a progressive way. So if you compare the two, you can see that it's quite obvious the before and the after, where the hierarchy is were non-existent in the prior version. If you read it closely, I mean, on the left, you don't see anything coming, highly being, it's not, nothing is coming out, nothing is catching your eye. Instead, on the right side, you immediately have something that, comes out that catches your attention, and then you follow the size of the letters. And then this one here, this is another thing. This is something that I got once again from the sisters for this celebration they're having. They're having, their 100-year celebration now. Here, there's a lot of confusion. Just like that image, you remember, with the many colors and the many dots that I had showed you, there is chaos. There is no reason, order. It's obvious that this is the heading, but nothing excels, nothing somehow um, appears more important of the others. This is my version instead, where beyond the choice of the font, etc., I also gave a lot of importance, more importance to the image of the blessed. Here it was just a ghost that was up there in this little balloon, and well, bless those who would see it. Instead, here she was quite, there was a close up, you could see her, and then I placed the whole text that they had in the other one, but then did it in a way where just immediately you would, see who you were talking about with some hierarchies, understanding which was the main message, and then gradually looking at all the other things that were mentioned. So you can see here there's a big difference. I hope that you can see here my effort in improving the project. Other things, Sant'Egidio community. So they had an event. This is what they sent me, thinking that this could be the best solution. They knew that it was not great, and they were wondering if if I could do something better. And I said, yes, of course. But here, then, once again, we should make more relevant other things. And I said, yes, this is the final result where we have changed the image, given more importance to the title or the heading, and then we have created different levels, reading levels. So here you don't understand anything. Here instead, you at least everything is here. At least everything is clearer because this is the objective. The objective is to be as clear as possible whenever we are communicating. So also the choice they had done of the image, yes, I mean, yes, you can see the desperation of a certain situation. Uh, there's some war going on, but it's not very efficient. Here is more. If it's easier if we concentrate on a picture that truly speaks to us and that is stronger and more relevant. Here we're speaking about an emergency, so emergency is the keyword. Another thing, another project for the community of Sant'Egidio. This is what I got, and this is how it became. This was an event. It was a day, a special feast on in honor of the saint of Sant'Egidio. So this is how they had it. They had a little picture of the saint here in the corner. Now, being this an event that was totally dedicated to the saint, it was better to just place it in plain sight. This is the saint of this is an image they have in their church, and then this is an initiative. So here it was here in the corner, which is promoting the event. So you had to be, which here also was not even placed, which it would be important to be there. Other things. This is another project. Can you help us? Can you improve this? This was something that they had used. They had just used the previous. Project a poster and they would just change the images and the words. Here, once again, nothing catches your eye. Maybe the pictures, but there is no hierarchy. There is no visual hierarchy. It's very chaotic. Everything is happening on the upper part of the poster. And here, what I try to do is to dress it differently, always respecting the different elements, the iconography, etc. But then it's just for them to understand that this is a yearly pilgrimage, where it's happening, who is organizing it. The first version was not clear. None of that was clear. You really needed to go and see and look where the information was. Here, I can immediately at least see things here. For example, on the left side, if I don't use my glasses, I can't read. On the right side, I see so much better, so it's great. So much great. I mean, it's so much better. And then this is another thing I got. This was a brochure. I was asked to improve it, and I did so, respecting the elements that were identified as key. Once again, this is the image of the sister, the venerable sister that they were celebrating. This was the initial image, actually. Careful, don't get scared. So this is what I got. So looking for better images because what they gave me were of very bad quality. I kept the same ingredients and I tried to cook the same dish with this similar ingredients, but using better raw material. I mean, the picture of the sister, that was all we had. There was no better one, so that's what we used. But then I tried to use, the background and also the contrasts. This is a cover that I did for a friend of mine, an architect. He had done this himself. And as you can see, it's a little sad. Colors are not really, popping out. And then, especially here, the cover, the information, the title, the author, it seems like there's no hierarchy here, and this is not right. So, what I did is this. It's a much more lively version with a title, a heading, a subtitle, yeah, on different levels. And then I made the sides wider. So this is a book which is quite big. So if that's the case, then you need to consider that what the pandala has to be bigger than what he had foreseen. So this is what I did. So these are just a few examples of things where you have a before and after, which I don't always do because it's not always happening, but it's just, fun. And I try to collect as many examples I had of the before and after so that you could see them and you could understand the work that needs to be done. Here, you really apply, or I have really applied what we have been saying until now. So you can really see that the eye of an expert can truly change things completely and help us as well. I think there are two examples that our participants had brought. I'm not sure we have the time. At least maybe we see them, he says. Someone actually wanted to present her own presentation to see what happened or what could be done to improve it, maybe. Yes?
Hello, good afternoon to everyone. I'll be presenting my work. It's just a deployment that was made recently. If you can correct or you can tell what is the best thing that my work should be improved. Thank you so much.
It's quite echoey, sister. Do you have a mic? Because there's a lot of echo.
Uh, could you hear me clearly? It's okay already. I'll be sharing my work. Moment, please.
Yes, carry on.
I sent it to Sister Therese, and she said she'll be the one to present it. That would be the second part of the present of the page. This is the first one. This was given to our benefactors. We had our dinner for a cause in order for them to understand what we are doing in the community. So I emphasize the title, the name of the congregation, where we are located because I am assigned in the Navsay house. And then at the other side is the presentation about the congregation itself. There is a sister because she's one of the missionary sisters that stayed in the Philippines. And then the vision and the mission. I italic the congregation charism in order to emphasize to the readers, and also for the increase, it's in the top of the down of the Blessed Virgin Mary, because the Blessed Virgin Mary is the name of the community. I just did not say the name of the Blessed Virgin Mary because I'm emphasizing about the Novitiate House. So the font that I've used there, it's the Albertus Nova. Then the other font that I use also in the other side, in the small font, that's Garrett and Laura. In the second page, I presented also using the Albertus Nova. That would be all.
Sì, sì, sì. Ma questo quindi è un
So,
documento
sister, so this
Yes,
is like a brochure that you
yes,
created, right? And that
yes,
has been
yes,
sent out.
yes,
è un Deplian così,
So it's like this. It's something that folds in three and it's
yes,
being opened
yes,
up, right? That's how it works.
yes,
Yes. So what
yes,
I see on the right is the front, right?
yes,
All the way to the right is the front. Then it folds. Then the
yes,
image is the back, and the
yes,
presentation part is the one that will end up in the middle, right? When it's folded inside. Yes. Okay. So if that's the case, can you turn off your mic, sister, because you're creating a lot of
la mia voce.
feedback. Thank you.
Allora, una cosa che
So
sul
something
punto 2
regarding the second
dei punti
point of what I said about the grids. You remember I said something about grids before, about the grid and the four main points. Well, here there's a
credo che
problem with how space is distributed. Obviously, I really see the lack
immagini, per
of
esempio a
margins.
sinistra della
For example,
presentazione,
on the left side, when
vedete
you have where you have the presentation, so it's without syllabization. So those little holes in the sentences is created. You better because then you have longer lines and smaller ones or shorter ones because of the choice that you did. But because it's justified, you should include the syllabization because then it would look better. And then the other thing that I see is that margins are
della presentazione
almost non-existent. The white, the empty space that you have is too little.
abbastanza inesistente,
On
perché
the sides, at the bottom, under mission, you have ministry there.
l'ultima della prima colonna a sinistra,
On the, underneath presentation, you have a little bit of margin on top, but then at the bottom, it just goes all the way to the where the page ends. Instead, you'd always need to have some space that you keep as a space that you need to safeguard and that you shouldn't use with nothing. The text, in my opinion,
almeno
should
un
fit
centimetro
in a way that you have at least a centimeter on the left and on the right
di
side.
margine.
So more margins on the left and on the right side. And then also at the bottom,
È a rischio
all
questo,
that information is at risk.
mettere
Because
questo
when you print out this brochure, if the typography were to cut it a little bit, then the last word won't be appearing or not fully. So you always need to leave enough margin so that you won't have bad surprises at the end when printing. And images are important
altra
but
cosa che
then margins are really important. And then another thing that I see here, the heading presentation is not centered. Is not all to the left, nor all to the right, nor in the middle. It's either in the middle or you need to justify it. I mean, there is an extra space. I think I suppose that it was used, to move. It was moved with space. But as vision and mission are centered, also the word presentation should be placed centered, and maybe the same size because this heading presentation is very big in comparison to the other two, vision and mission, which are also important.
lo stesso
So
carattere,
maybe I will use the same font and the same size of the other two and centered.
in copertina
And then, for example,
scriviamo
for the first page, I wouldn't place, for example,
testo e epigrafe
everything is centered. So also the coat of arms or your identification is all to the right. So somehow I don't know why, but it's not centered. I don't know if it was a choice or not, but it would be better to have everything in the middle, just like the picture and also the title, the Dominican Sisters. It's all centered. So maybe also that should be centered. This is, at the first glance, this is how I feel about it and my suggestions. Okay? When
Right.
it comes to
Thank
the fonts,
potessero
well,
semplificare
yes, maybe you could simplify it a little. Maybe you could remove.
non è lo stesso
Because the font of the cover is not the same font of the other, or maybe yes, I'm not sure. Is it the same font? The presentation is written in a different font from the Dominican Sisters of Blessed Imelda, right? So the ideal thing would use to use only one font. Maybe use the one that you used for Dominican Sisters, also for presentation, vision, and mission, and even also for inquiries. You should use the same font for everything. So that should be done, to remove what is useless or superfluous, so that you can use. And then, especially that part, presentation. It's similar to the text that you have at the bottom, novitiate house. It's Samisanfa, but it's not the same. So maybe you should just choose one and just use it for everything. It makes more sense, and it also just has a better effect without creating confusion with a font that is similar but is not the same. Okay. So these are the first things that I could tell you, just on the top of my head. Maybe I also would have made smaller the image of the Mother Mary, of the Virgin Mary. Maybe making what you have written underneath to fit better, because the information down there is actually important, and it's all the way down that might just be cut it off, or it might not be actually seen. So maybe just create more balance also when it comes to that middle page. I hope that was okay. Yeah, I hope that it was useful. It's not easy to do this, but then some things were so obvious that it was easy to mention. I hope that also for you now, after hearing me and hearing my presentation. Yes?
Presque à la fin de notre temps. Est-ce qu'il y a des questions, soit dans la salle,
We are
online?
moving towards the conclusion of our seminar, and we would like to know if there are more questions among the online participants or in the hall.
Si tutto è chiaro, benissimo.
Is everything clear? Then are there no questions?
Che tipo di programma si può usare?
What program can be used? It's an online question. In Italian, apologies.
Che tipo di
What
programma
kind
si
of
può usare?
program can be
Io
used?
conosco Publisher, ma
I know Publisher, but I don't know. Well, no, it's not really the best. It's not the best. I use InDesign. InDesign and Photoshop. Basically, that's what I use. All these projects you've seen, all of them have been made with InDesign and Photoshop. Photoshop to manage the images, but then uh, to put together text and images, I do that with InDesign. It's a professional program, which is a bit complex, a bit difficult to use, but that it gives me a lot of freedom to express myself. Other programs are a bit more limited when it comes to me. Publisher, I know it. I've seen it. It's a bit more limited and it's less flexible, in my opinion. So what I use. Is the standard one, professional standard app that is used in the world at the moment. Thank you. Another question? I would like to use the example of Sister Jessica and form. No, based on your experience, what is the criteria or criterion used when you are producing a vocational brochure that speaks about the congregation? Because our superiors tend to tell us that write as much as possible, but then that's not really how it works. So, do you have any suggestions when it comes to that? Well, yes, you have to remove what is not really necessary in order to catch the attention of the reader, using the different elements to do so. And Also, by making text lighter by using images or other things, because if you do a long leaflet with a long text, maybe you could alternate with images, maybe with something that could lighten up a little bit the brochure with different colors that can create some movement, and make the reading easier. Plus, when it comes to this kind of projects, I always try to really, I try to be very careful and tiptoe around the client and try to understand what they really need and want in order to use the colors or what they feel that is needed. Because the work I do is, it's like being uh, a tailor. I am actually producing something that I won't have to use or myself. It's a dress that somebody else will have to use. So I need to give them what they need, their size, their color, what they prefer, what they would like. Sometimes in our pamphlets or thing, we have a QR code that also can refer the person to know more so that you don't have to write everything inside the leaflet. Yes, exactly. That's really used a lot lately. That could be a way of doing it in order not to make the communication too heavy, to have a QR code giving basic information plus a QR code for those who would like to know more. You just, go to this link with a QR code or a link that will send you to a website where you can read everything you want about the congregation or everything. But then at least we have highlighted what we were truly trying to convey, the message we were trying to convey. And then the rest is just left for those who have the interest to read about it, because not everybody might be interested to know more. So less is better. Remember, it always applies. Thank you. Thank you. Another question? An online question. Could you give us a few suggestions on colors and the coherence that you were referring to when the coherence between colors and content? Is there something that can speak about it? Yes, we always need to remember that colors have an innate expression, or let me see if I can find it. I'm looking for it. So we have it here. We have emotions connected to the colors. And the awareness of this information helps us in the choice. So white is associated with purity, peace, clarity, cleanliness. Black is connected with elegance, power, control, refinement, depression. Also, because black can be also a dark element, but also can be a very elegant element. And then, because colors, depending on the context, can have different meanings. So the colors always need to refer to the need. So if you are working on a certain type of project, to use certain colors will probably be more appropriate. For example, if you're doing something connected with a religious event, maybe it's better to use a nice blue instead of using, or ivory instead of using yellow with red headings, It really always depends on the target, because if the target are kids, maybe something red or a red background with yellow letters could be perfect, You really need always to understand the emotions that are connected with the color that you're using and who is the target, because the meaning given to colors is quite universal, except for a few cases. Maybe there are differences between Eastern and Western world, but then black is used in the Western world when you are mourning, but then in other countries you might use white for that. So you need to understand which color is appropriate for the context, and also the the aim, the objective, and also the target that you are referring to, that you're trying to approach?
On arrive à la fin. Hein. Alors, tout simplement, d'abord, peut-être.
We are ready to conclude. So we only want to thank you. We want to thank our key speaker. We are aware that this is a world, a universe actually, that we can only enter very slowly. I believe we have learned a few key rules in order to avoid making at least some basic mistakes. I have at least learned, for example, that when you do a presentation on paper, it's very different from a presentation on a screen. So that's one thing. So thank you for being so clear. Thank you. And as this workshop was recorded, we will have the chance to go over it, to listen to what you've said again. Once again, thank you to the interpreters. So thank you. Who had to make quite an effort to be able to follow the whole conversation. So thank you for that. And to conclude, and in order to learn about the future sessions that we will be working on in combination with the UISG and USG. In order to do so, we need to be spurred and supported in order for this process and this journey to carry on. So we need you and your support because we want to keep these seminars to be international and to be of a certain level, which require interpreters who are capable, and this also has a cost. So we encourage you to encourage us financially and to support us financially. We've already said it back in June when we presented the project and the plan for the project. One way of doing so is to become an official member of Yanemi, such as a congregation. All this you can see on the website of MMI, and how to become a member of MMI and like that, supporting us or as an individual or as a congregation by paying the yearly fee, or if there were specific workshops in presence. It might also be possible to come and give a donation. In the future, we will try also to allow for donations to be done through PayPal on the MMI website, which would be a much easier mean and way to do so. And the best way to encourage us to carry on is with your support. So thank you for doing so. Very soon, the MMI website and UISG and USG websites will publish the program for the next year. Thank you for your presence. Thank you to all those who were here in presence, those who were following online. We wish you the best for this Advent period. Have a nice Christmas.